Welcome back, TV fans. This is going to be part 2 of our special top 30 TV shows of all time list. So we've each prepared our own list of 30. On the first video, we did 30 to 22. So we're going to continue with 6 more each on this video. So a bit of a shorter one this time, which will be 21 down to 16, and then we'll finish it off in the third part. I encourage you to let us know some of your picks, and you can also post your own in the comments below. So Rachel, if you want to kick us off with your number 21.
Yep. All right. So my number 21 is actually a show that only ran for one season. And it was a spin-off from another show that I originally liked and then fell out of favor with because of some narrative choices that they made. So my number 21 is the spin-off Once Upon a Time in Wonderland. So Once Upon a Time, the main show, came out 7 or 8 years ago and was based around subverting fairy tales. Snow White, the evil queen, there was a town with a curse. It was actually a really fun show for the first couple of seasons. And then it started to go downhill. But they did, while the show was airing, do a spin-off called Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, which obviously is based on Alice's adventures in Wonderland. However, for this one, they made Alice an adult. And this sounds like a very weird mashup, but it worked. They kind of did a little bit of an Aladdin mashup with Alice in Wonderland. So she essentially finds a genie in a lamp, falls in love with this genie, but there is a character called Jafar who was played by Naveen Andrews, and he is just having the best time playing this character.
Okay.
Yeah. And he wants to get the genie because, you know, obviously that's the story of Jafar. Now, we also have the Wonderland forces working against them. There's the Red Queen, Anastasia, who we actually find out is one of Cinderella's ugly stepsisters. Not at all ugly, but again, it's kind of works into the mythology. And the series really kicks off when Alice loses the genie that she's in love with, Cyrus. He's kidnapped by the Red Queen and she thinks that he has died. And then Will, the Knave of Hearts, he's actually from the Merry Men. There's all sorts of weird mythology being mashed up in here. Will Scarlet, who was one of Alice's friends, ends up coming to her to find her, and they go to Wonderland to rescue her love, Cyrus. And along the way, you get all these reveals about Alice's past, about Cyrus, about Will, about all the characters, and you find out how they all interconnect, and it all comes to this really fantastic conclusion at the end of a series where everything is kind of resolved and everyone kind of wins, and it actually works as a one-season show. Now, the reason I just love this so much is because it only ran for one season, and because they had very obviously planned, it's actually a really great little story just in and of itself. It's only like about 10 episodes, but it's like watching a really long movie. It's fun, the characters are great. I mean, Alice in Wonderland is always a story that's fun to play with because Wonderland is such a crazy place. You know, it's kind of like Oz. You can do almost anything you want with this place. And there are lots of shout outs to, you know, the actual Alice in Wonderland story. You have the White Rabbit, you have the Crazy Caterpillar, you have the Red Queen, you have the Queen of Hearts. So you've got all of those shout outs, but it also ties into the original series because we get a couple of characters from the original series like pop up here. And like I said, it goes really deep with these characters in a way that you wouldn't expect a spin-off show to do in only one season. There's also a lot of fun effects because it is in Wonderland, so the place looks very uncanny and very bizarre, and they really play with the fact that within Wonderland you could do certain things with your settings, with your characters, and the character of Alice herself is a fantastic character. Because they age her up, so she's not a child anymore, they have a lot of fun with playing with, you know, how her reaction to Wonderland was seen in the real world. You know, like when she comes back to the real world and she says, you know, I've been to this fantastical place, her father ends up putting her in a mental asylum because they think that she's crazy. So it's got all of these really fun things that they play with. Oh, and another little fun fact, little Alice, because we do see Alice when she's a child, so little 7-year-old Alice is played by a pre-Stranger Things Millie Bobby Brown. So it must have been just before she got the Stranger Things gig that she did Wonderland. So that was a little, because I remember when I saw Stranger Things, she looked vaguely familiar to me. And then one day when I was watching Wonderland, I was like, oh, that's Millie. So that was fun. So yeah, Wonderland was just a really fun spin-off, and because it was self-contained and it was only one season, we get a complete show, we get a complete arc. And while I would have loved more seasons, sometimes the upside with a one-season show is there's no chance for the show to run out of steam. There's no chance for it to decrease in quality. You know, you get that one great season, and then that's just fantastic. So both Stephen and I really loved this, and we do revisit it quite frequently. And even though it was only one season, that actually I think may have turned out to be a good thing, especially when you look at the parent show and how downhill Once Upon a Time actually went and how convoluted it got. I'm very glad that like Wonderland didn't have the time to do that. So even though it was only one season, it made a big enough impression of me, and I loved it enough that it's made it to this list. So my number 21, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland.
It'll be interesting to see if the other show, the main show that it's spun off from, will be on your list a bit later on. Yeah.
Yep.
So my number 21, it's a rare example of a modern remake which is better than the original, quite a bit better, I would say. And that is sort of a modern sci-fi classic. It is Battlestar Galactica.
I had a feeling that you were going to go there.
Yeah, it's the 2000s reboot, and it takes the premise of the original Battlestar, which is a good premise on its own, like this idea of humans having to coexist with like these Cylons, like alternative beings. You've got the idea of people being mind controlled and the whole like AI style themes, which is only really a small part of that original show, but it's a concept which the modern show, being more modern, really runs with and makes it the core. Original show in the late 70s, I think it was basically riffing off Star Wars. I think that original show existed because of Star Wars, because I think season 1 was like 78, which is obviously the year after the original Star Wars. So they were definitely, and sci-fi TV for the most part back then wasn't really advanced the way it is now. Like it was very traditional, quite masculine, space adventure type shows. It's obviously come a long way now, and you see that in this reboot. You see how diverse the casts are, you know, different nationalities represented, different like genders represented, and just the whole like diverse nature of the storylines and some of the themes they tackle. But from the original show, which was a man, that they transform it into a woman this time around. And it's the, damn it, I keep forgetting the name. It's the one, you know, who was in Halloween Resurrection, the blonde one.
Katie Sackhoff?
Yeah, it's her.
Yeah.
That's who it is. And she's really good in there. And a bunch of other really strong, like, diverse casts all the way through. You've got, I keep forgetting his name, but the guy who was in Blade Runner and a bunch of other things, really good, like, character actor, Captain Adama on the show. He's a really good, solid presence, very, very intriguing character to unpack. He has a really sweet and moving relationship with the Mary McDonnell character, who she plays kind of, she's another good actress, but she plays like the president at the start of the show, that she's dying because she's got cancer, and the way that plays out through the seasons is really intriguing and moving. And because they have quite a fractured relationship at times, because like often their politics come into conflict, and often they disagree on certain decisions and stuff, but they initially have to coexist once events start to go down in the opening episode. But they do form a really like quite sweet and tender romance over the course of the show, and the way it ends off with them, which I won't spoil, but that's a very like moving scene as well. It started as like a mini series, like sort of a one-off mini series to like maybe try and get the network to sign up for more episodes, but they initially just put it out as like this big long mini series, which was meant to set up the premise for a wider show. So it was like something like 2, maybe 3 episodes, but they were sort of like feature length. And once again, because this was like 2004, something like that, so the budget and just how cinematic that mini-series was quite jaw-dropping. And bearing in mind this was network TV as well, so
Yeah.
it really was event TV kind of at its best, really. And once they did get picked up for like an actual proper series, they could then expand on the themes and the characters as well. As I said, very strong casting. It's got its own like unique dialogue, a bit like I was talking about on my last pick with Deadwood, but Battlestar also has that, where they have a particular way of swearing, which is a constant like running gag in the show, which is very entertaining. And
Is
it's
that
like
where
something
the
like
term frack comes
sort of
from?
thing.
Yeah.
That's the way they swear in the show. So that's really fun stuff. It did drag on a little bit, but definitely over the course of the show that they experiment with a lot of ideas. It's a very epic show, a very exciting action show. Like there's some great direction with the action, but crucially it updates like the good premise of the original show, but it really does something with it. And I'll just say, just to cap it off, I think the finale's fantastic. I think the finale might be one of my favourite finales, maybe ever.
Nice.
And it really baffles me, people saying that they don't like it, like the finale. Like, to me, when you watch that finale, it really couldn't have left things off any better, because what it does, which I like, is it ties things up in a satisfying way, but it doesn't tie them up too much. Like it doesn't completely spell things out.
Yeah.
And depending on the show, I tend to prefer that. But in this sort of show where it's sci-fi and there's big ideas and stuff, I don't think you want everything explained to you. I think it is good to have a little bit of that where, like, it's tied up enough for me, but there's still things that you can leave open type thing. And the use of music at the end, like the Jimi Hendrix song, the way they use that all along the Watchtower is a great like use of songs. It's one of those really great like bits of music to end like a season. And it happens very rarely with films that like a remake or reboot, whatever you want to say, is better than the original. It probably happens even less with TV, although TV, I guess now modern TV has an advantage because things have moved on so much. But this, if you're a sci-fi fan, this is like really epic event style TV. So that's Battlestar Galactica, my number.
Very
21.
cool. Well, I haven't watched it because, as I've talked about before on this channel, science fiction, not a genre that I love or really get along with well. But Steven loves Battlestar Galactica. He recently, so he recently watched it at the insistence of one of his best friends, and he got completely hooked. And I was looking behind me because I know that we've got it somewhere here. There you go. You can see it just there.
Cool.
So I do know that those who like enjoy the genre definitely enjoy this show, and it seems like it is definitely one of the the better shows to come out of that time period in that genre. So very cool. All right, so for my number 20, I'm going to hold you to something you said in our previous video, which was if I had this show on my list, you were going to sing the theme song. So let's have it.
Do 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 do. I don't want to wait for our lives to be over. I want
That's
to
very
know
good.
right now. Will it be? There you go. There you go. That'll
Dawson's Creek.
For the sake of the internet, I'll spare you the rest.
So yes, it is. Look, this I think you probably had an inkling that this show was going to turn up on my list because I have talked about Dawson's Creek before. Now, this obviously part of this show being on my list is a big nostalgia factor. This is one of the few teen dramas that I actually watched as a teen. So I remember, the drama of Pacey and Joey versus Dawson and Joey and all of the stuff that like came up around Dawson's Creek, all the jokes about casting like 30-year-olds as teenagers and just everything, all the pop culture stuff that sprung up around Dawson's Creek. That being said, I think Dawson's Creek is not as bad as everyone remembers it being, especially given that it's a teen drama. Teen drama in and of itself is quite an interesting, subgenre of TV, just the variation you get. And I think that Dawson's Creek is one of the more realistic teen dramas. I think I've spoken about this before. Dramas like Gossip Girl or even The OC or, there's a few others like even 90210 to a certain extent. They deal with kids that live in these very rich, very elite upper class societies that your average teen doesn't really live in, whereas Dawson's Creek dealt with teens that lived in middle and lower class situations. Joey's family were a lower class situation. Dawson's family were very middle class. Jen came from a broken home. And so we actually saw these teens do things that teens do. We actually saw them go to school. We actually saw them have after school jobs. We actually saw them worrying about money and worrying about money for college. And so I think that Dawson's Creek had a realism that a lot of other teenage dramas just seem to have lost. I mean, obviously, the over verbose dialogue and the way that some of these teens dealt with their problems was quite unrealistic. But when I watch it, I feel like this was more relatable than, Gossip Girl or The OC or 90210 could be for teens. I also have a lot of fun with a lot of the characters. Pacey Witter is one of the best characters ever. Jen Lindley, Jack McPhee, these are all great characters. I even have a soft spot Dawson himself. I know Dawson gets a lot of hate these days, and I understand there are some aspects of his character that have not aged well, but I think Dawson actually has a lot of growth, and I think the storyline in season 5 with his dad passing away is a really powerful storyline, and they actually develop his character quite well there. So, I have fun with Dawson's Creek. It's so 90s, so when I watch it, I just get so nostalgic for the 90s fashion and the 90s music, and just everything about it is so 90s, right down to the fact that Dawson and Pacey work in a video rental store. I mean, how 90s is that? And Dawson's Creek is one of those shows that when I return to it, it just makes me feel very warm and fuzzy. There's a big nostalgia factor attached to Dawson's Creek. And I think that sometimes nostalgia that powerful can really carry you through and can really help you to forgive a lot of mess ups, because let's face it, that show has got some truly epic lows. Like, some of the storylines are just like, ugh, and in the later seasons, and the finale is kind of a mess. So we don't want to talk about what they do to poor Jen and how much I love Jen and what a better ending she deserved than what she got on that show. So yes.
The finale's quite weird, isn't it? Because they seem to tie it up one episode before, but then they brought it back for one more.
It's like they do a season finale, so they tie up everything that happened in season 6, but then they come back and do like a series finale, which is basically just focusing on the Joey Dawson Pacey love triangle, which quite frankly, I don't have any vested interest in. I was always more of a Pacey and Andy and Jen and Dawson shipper, for the fact that it takes me back to being a teenager. And so that's why it absolutely had to be in this list. So that's my number 20, Dawson's Creek. I don't want to wait for our lives to be over. So there we go.
So cheesy. Just sticks in your head.
Yeah,
okay. Well, this is just me being a bit of a sick bastard, but I always get a chuckle every time the dumb dad dies. He's an absolute moron. He's stupid. He's eating an ice cream and he's singing along to a rock song and he's not even watching the damn road. That son of a bitch had that coming.
Yeah. The way Mitch dies is stupid. The
so
aftermath
comical.
is dealt with really well, though. But yes, that was kind of dumb.
Is bad. Yeah. What a way to go. That's almost bordering on Final Destination type way. But
we could put that in the Darwin Awards, I think. Yeah. No, I hear you. The actual death is quite stupid. The aftermath, however, is dealt with quite well. Yeah. But you're right.
You on this because I grew up as well, so it is more of a guilty pleasure show. It is more of a comfort blanket for me. I did rewatch it recently. I sort of rewatched the whole thing because I don't think I'd ever quite seen it all the way through because there is quite a lot of it, but I did finish it recently, and ups and downs like you said, but it is a good sort of nostalgic show, a good sort of comfort blanket. Like I've said to you before, I think some of the best episodes are the episodes where they get quite meta and they do like a themed episode.
Yeah.
Like a classic example. being like the Breakfast Club style episode.
Yes,
They're all
yes.
in detention, and that's a Kevin Williamson like script one, so that's kind of him in his element in many ways. And I also enjoy the one that's on Friday the 13th. That's quite a fun episode.
Yeah.
So
there's a fun little Blair Witch one as well in season 3, which is a little fun one as well.
Yeah, popular opinion amongst quite a few people, but I'm actually like, I like Andy and Pacey as well, but like I'm actually a Joey Pacey shipper.
Boo!
Not that I really ship things anyway, but I'm just saying I do quite like. Well, I'll tell you what it is. Partly is like when you see them in those early episodes, and they're always bickering and at odds. It's that sort of energy, like love to hate style energy, when they're just like riffing off each other and winding each other up. So I think they naturally have good like chemistry from that like opening.
Joey and Pacey are very popular.
Like them together.
No, they are the most popular Dawson's Creek pairing. And even back in the day, I liked them because we were all so sick of Joey and Dawson. So I think when we were presented with a new option, it was just like, yes. But I just love Andy so much. And her and Pacey and their relationship in season 2 was just so perfect. And I really hate that it was just kind of steamrolled in order to make Joey and Pacey work. But anyway, we should have a whole Dawson's Creek discussion at some point.
We'll get
really
to
get into that.
Like even in some ways, although I can see they did a good job with it, but I definitely agree with it about tying up the who's Joey gonna go with, like, because you didn't really need to do that. You didn't need to do it one way or the other, because at that point she's had relationships with Dawson, with Pacey, and probably because she's been with both at some point, it probably just makes sense for her just to go to France, like she always wanted to,
and that's why I much
just on her own, and like,
the season finale was so good, exactly, because it just showed everyone on their own doing their own thing, and if you wanted to imagine in the future that she and Pacey got together, then you could. You know, we didn't need that absolute confirmation.
Open-ended sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it was getting quite close to the end of the series, and she had the relationship with that other guy as well.
Yeah,
the one
that
in
Eddie
the bar.
guy.
Yeah, I kind of got the impression she might end up with him, if anyone, and then that didn't. But number 20 is another teen show, but quite a different one in some ways. It's the show that would influence Buffy a few years later, and it is called My So-Called Life. That's my number 20. So mentioned this on this podcast before. Very ahead of its time, really edgy teen show from the 90s. You've got Claire Danes in the role that sort of was her calling card and opened her up to like Hollywood style roles. A classic one season show, probably alongside Firefly, the greatest one season show ever, I would probably say. But it's just one of those things, because sometimes when you watch some of these other shows like Dawson's Creek, like 90210, you may enjoy them as a show, but a lot of times you do come away saying, yeah, that's more fantasy, that's not really that realistic to how teens are, or not the complete teen experience maybe. But this does feel more authentic from the start. Like the issues they cover were ahead of their time for a network show. The diversity of the cast, I've mentioned it before, but just like the opening shots when Angela, the Claire Danes character, is in the hallway, it gets inside her mind visually, and just the chaotic nature of like a hallway in like a high school, and all these different factions, all these different people like mulling around, crazy sort of jungle type thing with all these different cultures colliding, and just a lot of energy, sophistication with her and her friends. Like she has a gay best friend called Ricky. His storyline, he's also an Hispanic character, so that is another ahead of its time thing about the show. He has a really nice personality, nice friendship with Angela and with the other main friend on the show. And you just get really meaty characters. Even outside of the main group, you get really good, like, supporting characters. Angela's mum and dad are like a delightful, very 90s mum and dad, I'd say, but they feel very realistic in many ways. And like just the family dynamic, she has a really cute younger sister called Lisa, and she's really nice. They have some fun banter back and forth, and really, really nice casting, even though it's a bit sad now looking back because it's got Jared Leto in, who we all now hate. But
Yeah.
as I mentioned before on another video, he is playing this self-obsessed bohemian style character, so not too far away from the real Jared Leto.
Yeah.
It's fair to say, solid in the role because of that. But really refreshing 90s teen show, ahead of its time. Very few have really matched it since. You've got 20 pretty much perfect episodes where you get certain themes, because obviously there was a Halloween episode, which I had on my Halloween list. There's a Christmas style episode. So you get certain themes in there, and you have arcs, but you also have standalone episodes. So it's a nice sort of mix throughout the season. But for a 20 episode one-off season, it's pretty much flawless. You can't really ask for a lot more. It's very grounded and understated, impressive characters and acting. You can really see from this performance why Claire Danes has gone on to become such a big star. Like, you can see that raw talent is there from the very start in this role, and it's a really satisfying like teen drama, which I highly recommend. It has some good stylistic touches at times, some good use of music. Once again, as we've said with certain other shows that get cancelled before their time on network, it has such a frustrating finale at the very end. Like, if I'm going to maybe give it a black mark, that probably is the only one, because I remember watching it for the first time knowing that this was it, and it got towards the end, and I looked at like the time, and I realised there's only about 15 minutes to go, and it's oh my God, they're not going to wrap this up. And so it's left on this big cliffhanger, and I don't think it's known for sure why there wasn't more. Like, it's partly to do with Claire Danes like choosing not to come back, and there's different reasons for that. I think one reason is she was being pushed towards movies. Yeah. And I think there's certain other factors. Like, it's not one reason or the other. The ratings weren't great, which is always going to be a factor, but, you know. But highly recommend the show, despite the frustrating, cliffhanger that is never going to be resolved now. It's a really standout show and ahead of its time. Really great show. I highly recommend My So-Called Life from 94, 95, and it's my number 20.
Very nice. I knew that show would end up on your list because you have talked so highly about it before, and it is one that I will definitely watch at some point. I mean, I've heard nothing but praise for this show, and when you end up with articles like best cancelled TV shows and things like that, you will almost always find this show on those types of lists. People seem to really praise it, and it does seem like it was a really well written show. Just sounds like you said, a number of factors just prevented it from being renewed, which is a pity, because it sounds like had it been renewed, it might have even gone on to be even stronger and maybe built upon the characterization that you said was already so good. So it's a shame it didn't go on, but as we've said before, sometimes when shows only get one season, you at least don't have the opportunity for them to decline in quality,
for it to
exactly to kind of mess up and disappoint you. So sometimes one season can be a blessing in disguise, but it can also be very frustrating, and I get that as well. But I will definitely check that one out at some point.
I think we'll cover that show.
Yes, I think we should,
because it is
definitely.
only the one season, so
that'll be a good one to do, and it'll be fun because I'll be a first-time watcher, and that'll be interesting to see, how it goes first time around. Teen drama theme. My number 19 is yet another teen drama, and another teen drama that is a little bit more realistic than all the fantastical ones out there, and that is Skins UK. Now, I had to say UK because unfortunately there is a crappy American version that only ran for a season, but Skins UK I love Skins. So this one came out in the early 2000s, and it was very much hailed as being a much more realistic look at teen life. And it was also marked for the fact that it used actual teenagers. So the actors were actually 17, 18, 19 years old, which was a rarity back then. You know, obviously people, they like to use older actors because they can work longer hours and things like that. But Skins, I found for me, was really the first teen drama that I felt my teen years were kind of reflected in. Now, I know that Skins is quite extreme for some people, and it wasn't everyone's teen experience to have this sort of intensity. But the fact that this show shows these teens partying, drinking, smoking weed, skipping school, sneaking out of their parents' houses, going for wild parties, like this was the experience I had in my final year of high school. And I very much saw it reflected in Skins. It's got fantastic characters. So for anyone who hasn't watched Skins, it's done in what they call generations. So every 2 seasons, ran for 6 seasons, they swap out the main group of characters for a new generation. So therefore, you always have teen characters, so they don't end up following them to college. I really only like generations 1 and 2. Generation 3, I didn't blend that well with, but Gen 1 and Gen 2 have some fantastic characters. Also got some breakout actors. I mean, this was Nick Holt's, like, I think, big stepping stone into, you know, more movies. He had done a few things when he was a kid, but this was kind of a thing that pushed him up. Dev Patel, a very young Dev Patel, is in this, and he's fantastic as well. K.S. Scodelario has gone on to do a few more things. So you do have some recognizable faces, and the characters themselves are very varied. So you have like a huge variety of characters. Because it's set in England, we finally get an Indian teen character in Anwar. He's fantastic. And you get to see, you know, different walks of life. They have gay characters, they have bi characters. There's a whole, you know, relationship in the second generation between 2 girls. So there's a lot of diversity in Skins. Swearing like you wouldn't believe it, which I absolutely love. It's one of those shows that kind of uses swearing in such a way, like you were saying with one of your shows, that it just becomes part of the language, and it just becomes part of the rhythm and the way they speak. Hilarious show at times, because some of the characters are so funny, but it also goes really deep because a lot of these teens are dealing with really intense issues. Almost none of them come from good homes. There's one particular girl who is dealing with anorexia and self-harm. You've got kids that have dealt with suicide attempts, overdose attempts, drug use, things like that. So it was a little bit criticized for showing like this sort of material to teens, but I thought it was a very good depiction because I thought to myself, there are teenagers that go through this. You know, they are extreme issues, but they're definitely issues that touch teenagers. So I think anyone watching this show can see themselves in at least one of the characters. And obviously for teen shows, that is quite important because that's what connects you to the audience. I think it's filmed really well. They actually have some fun with the filming. They have some sequences that are a little bit fantastical and a little bit outside of reality. And then they have some really intense, beautiful scenes that are done to like great music. And there's some great, you know, just somber ensemble scenes. And it's just a really fun show. It's very intense, and I haven't watched it since I was in my early to mid 20s. And I'm a bit worried that if I watch it now, I'm just going to feel so sad because I will see how young these characters are and how messed up their lives are, and it just will make me want to just give them all a big hug. But Skins just grabbed me from the moment I started watching it. I could not look away. It was just that intense. And Skins UK, that is my number 19. Truly, I think one of the best teen dramas out there.
Yeah, excellent. I know that's a show you've mentioned before. You've got a strong passion for that show, and it just hit you at the right sort of age during the right sort of era by the sounds of it. There is something to what you said there where if you revisited now, it probably wouldn't be quite the same. And certainly for some adults, because I've never seen it, so chances are it could never really have the same impact on me as it had on you. But because a lot of people do recommend it, I definitely will check out some of it at some point. My number 19 is a show which I think you will definitely have much higher if I'm to guess, and that is Angel. That's my
I had a feeling you were going to say that. Oh, I'm a little disappointed it's so low, but we'll see what else you've got on your list.
Yeah. Well, you may be judged after that, but 19 to me feels about right. So the spin-off to Buffy, and a bit like Frasier that I mentioned in the last part. It is a great example of how you do a really successful spin-off where it definitely feels like it's in the same universe as Buffy. It definitely complements like the parent show, but it definitely does its own thing as well. It's obviously a much darker depiction on that universe than Buffy is. And it really opens up the Angel character even more and gives you the opportunity to explore his past further, to explore like his quest to make amends ultimately, which is something that's set up on Buffy. And just a really, once again, a bit like we said with Veronica Mars, but in a different sort of show. There's something I think we both latch on to with like the noir sort of genre, and that's a big subgenre, especially in the early seasons of Angel. I think they move away a little bit from it later on, but certainly the early season, like seasons 2, 3, they definitely have that sort of feel, and that is some of the strongest stuff of those seasons. I think just the style of it and the way you have this setup. Like they have a really cool like hotel set base, the Aperion Hotel, which I do like them. That's historically a real thing as well, and they draw from that. That's really cool, and it's just a bit like the library or the magic shop in Buffy. It is just this great distinct home base for them to work from, and because it is one of these old style hotels, the sort of thing you might see in like The Shining or that sort of thing, it just has this old fashioned sort of character, and it's just a really good set for them to work around and really use to do different things. So there's a lot they can do because it is such a big set. So like for example, where they do certain rituals there, they do certain spells. You have the whole thing with Skip in a later season, like him coming out of a portal in the floor. Different things. Obviously later on when the Connor plot is really kicking into gear, you have him returning from a hell dimension through there. So it is actually similar to Buffy, like the early episodes of Buffy, as in, for me personally, I think it is a bit of a slow start. Like, I would say season 1 of Angel is better than season 1 of Buffy, and I think that's because they had the advantage of being a bit more set in the universe and knowing where they were going and feeding off what had been set up before. But it's still very up and down. There are some rough episodes in that first season, and so I feel it is like more consistent in season 2, and then it sort of grows from there. Certainly season 3 is my favorite season. There's a lot of great storytelling in that season. The whole Dara ongoing plot with Angel, like their whole relationship, the way that explored is really satisfying. You obviously get some great character depth with the supporting characters. They build on the Cordelia character. Like, sadly, she doesn't have a great end on the show, but certainly in those early seasons, she has a really good run, and they build more on her Buffy character. I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion or not, but personally, I still prefer her a bit more on Buffy, and
that's unpopular. Probably I
think it might be
Angel.
But that's a discussion for another day. We can definitely bring up why I feel that way. But still, very good run on Angel as well. Like her as part of the team. I like the growth that they give her. Wesley is obviously a tremendous character. He makes a bit of a modest start on the show, but like his arc is just like fantastic by the time you get to the end of his character in season 5. Like the character then sort of transforms, and we see in like season 3 and 4 is so different to like the more comedic goofy character we see at the start of that show. Really well directed show overall, with some great like random monster of the week style episodes, some great mythology building, the whole Wolfen and Hart as like a constant thorn in Angel's side. There's so much you can do with an evil law firm in like a city like LA, and they really explore that to its fullest. So there's obviously ups and downs over the 5 seasons. So as I said, I think season 3 is is the peak. I really like the storytelling in season 3. We get one of the best villains of the whole Buffyverse in Holt's wonderful performance
Holt is
from that
great.
actor, and such a complex character where you do have
Yes.
legitimately a lot of sympathy for him. That is definitely a situation which isn't clean cut. You know, he's not just a stereotypical this is the bad guy and good guy. There's a lot of complexities in that, which I really love. So it's a very satisfying show. It is very rewatchable. Fred is a wonderful character. Obviously, Amy Acker, such an underrated character. I love her in Person of Interest as well, as I said. And she's another one. She does get quite a slow start on the show, but she really comes on leaps and bounds. Like, sort of Fredless is obviously the big turning point for her character. That's a really strong season 3
fantastic episode.
And from there on, she does look back on the show, and obviously there's a very interesting development with her at the end, which I won't spoil, is they didn't know they were getting cancelled. So it's one of those. I think if they got a 6th season, then the complaint you have wouldn't really be a complaint because we would get more of it.
Possibly, but we'll see when we get to Angel.
We can discuss Angel. Props to Amy Acker for playing that other character so well when that stuff goes down. Yeah, and very good season finale as well. I think the Angel season finale is right up there for season finales. They do a great job, that final episode.
Yep.
So that's Angel, my number 19.
Terrific. Well, we all know I love Angel, and I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying, it will be on my list, but we'll leave it as to where it will be on my list. It just depends on how high. Yes, exactly. Well, you listing Angel as your 19 kind of leads into my 18, because my 18 is somewhat linked to the Buffyverse because it is a Buffyverse actor who is in the title role, which I may have just given away what it is. Very short-lived show, only 2 seasons, or really 1 season and a half, and that is the short-lived True Calling. So, True Calling, so True Calling
me
came
writing
out.
Down Dollhouse.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you swerved me. True Calling. Yeah.
I did, didn't I? Yes.
Sorry,
So just keeping you on your toes. So True Calling came out shortly after Buffy finished. This was Eliza Dushku's next big role. And the concept of this I actually really liked. So she plays True Davies, who is a med student who has taken a job in a morgue to plump up her resume for med school. And when she's there, she discovers that corpses will ask her for help. And these are corpses of people who have died unnatural deaths, suicides, accidents, murders, things like that. And when the corpse asks her for help, she then restarts her day with the knowledge of everything that she's already garnered about that person, and she then has to spend the day saving them. So it sounds like a simple premise, but it opens up a lot of opportunities and a lot of different scenarios. So when the show first starts, we obviously, for the first few episodes, we get the very standard Body asks for help, True relives the day. She might help a few other people along the way, and then she saves a person. But as the show goes on, they start to have variations on this asking for help and what exactly it means when someone asks for help. For example, there's an episode, The Longest Day, I think it is, or something like that, where basically she repeats the same day about 5 times because the initial person that asked her for help, it turns out he died by being shot through the heart. His daughter needs a heart transplant, so she has to help this guy die in a way that preserves his heart. And it takes her about 4 different retries to realize what she needs to do. So I really like that the show took this very simple premise and started to expand it. I think Eliza is quite good in the title role. I think that True is a fun character. I know that they were going to develop her further if the series had continued. I think she's got a great supporting cast of character. You've got Zach Galifianakis in one of his earliest roles playing Davis, the morgue attendant, who becomes her confidant and kind of like her Giles figure. You know, he becomes her mentor and he ends up helping her. You've got her brother Harrison, who is a very messed up character, and a lot of her days she will almost always end up having to fix a problem of Harrison's, and he has a nice little arc in learning to become a better person and be, better, and he is eventually let in on True Secret. And of course, as we've spoken before in other in other episodes that we've done on this podcast, you have Jack, who is played by Jason Priestley, who comes in halfway through the first season to kind of shake things up, because it turns out that he is Prue's opposing force. So there's a lot of really fun setup and really fun characters. And again, similarly to Ghost Whisperer, I really like the Monster of the Week formula on this show, because it gives you a really nice insight into, again, how people deal with death, how grief affects you, how certain circumstances affect you. There are big themes of like fate, and should you be messing with fate, because obviously it comes up later, like when True intervenes in a life, she is technically saving a life that maybe should have died, and is there a death's design? And eventually they were going to develop all of these big concepts in this show, which unfortunately they never got round to, because the show was very abruptly cancelled 6 episodes into season 2. And it's such a pity, because the episode that it actually ends on, which was the Christmas episode that was actually on my Christmas list, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, again, actually starts to open up all these little threads. And season 2 has a very interesting incident where True saves someone who didn't actually ask to be saved. So there's the whole, has she really messed up a design there? So I think that True Calling had a lot of potential. And I think it's a real shame that potential was not realized, because I think when you watch the show now, it can seem maybe like it shouldn't be on this list because, there wasn't enough. But knowing what I know and where they were going to go with the show and what we already had with the show and the episodes that we already had, I think that had it gone on for more seasons, it would have become really, really great and really solid. As it is, what we got is really entertaining. Like I said, I think Eliza does a good job in the title role. I think the supporting characters are really fun. Jason Priestley was a great addition, and him as Jack is just like one of my favorite aspects of the show. I think he does so well kicking against True and playing a bit of a smartass character. He has a great episode in season 2 where we get to see a little bit more depth to him, and we get to see a little bit more about like what his side of the job, the toll that it takes on him. So yeah, I think it's a real pity that this show was cancelled so early, because it really is a fun show. It's really fun to watch, and whenever I revisit it, I really enjoy myself. So that's my number 18, True Calling.
Yeah, good stuff. I like that show as well. But it's like you said, it's another sad example of like missed opportunity, what could have been, because it definitely only would have got better if they had the opportunities and more episodes to really flesh it out fully. And once again, like you said, a frustrating cliffhanger at the end of that Christmas episode, a bit like I was saying before. With
my so-called life. Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those shows, because I don't always go for like typical network style shows, and it took a little bit of getting into that one, just because at times it felt quite typical network and kind of quite soapy. But once it got more into the main core of the concept, and it got more into like the sci-fi or fantasy style stuff, and really played with the format and the characters, that's when it really got excited. I also like the episode where there's several different ones on the same day. That's a really great example of really shaking things up. And good role for Eliza Dushku. She's fun in it and like entertaining to watch, and like you said, good supporting cast. I do like, what's the name of the character at the Morty Sakarakis character?
Davis.
He's really charming as well. They have a nice like sort of friendship there, so good stuff. And Jason Priestley, like you said, a good role for him. He's kind of in his head there. So really strong villain, but just a shame we didn't get more, because I think it only would have got better, really. Number 18 is another sort of gem of like 90s TV, and another show which was quite far ahead of its time, especially on the network. But like, I think in this case for the genre, for like procedurals, because my number 18 is the show Murder One, which had 2 seasons, sort of in the mid to late 90s. Now, the second series was Murder 2, and I've still not seen that, so I am going for Murder 1 in particular, but obviously Murder 2 was like a sequel type series. And this was very rare at the time, because what you have is you have a 1-season case and an arc over that season. where there's like a murder trial and you get like the two main suspects. And I haven't mentioned this before, but one of them played by Stanley Tucci, so a very early role
Oh,
for him
nice.
on
Love Stanley
TV.
Tucci.
Yeah, wonderfully slimy in that. He plays this very high class, upper class sort of slime bag who's one of the main suspects. And the other main suspect is this more like sort of bad boy style Hollywood like actor who has a lot of drink and drug style problems. He's
Okay.
the main suspect initially, and he gets represented by this law firm, and it's like the main law firm of the show, and the guy Teddy's his character is who runs the law firm, like is head of the practice, and you get a whole host of characters who work for him. So you've got like Catherine McCormack's in the show, for example, but a bunch of other people, a lot of familiar faces pop up on it. You've got Patricia Clarkson is on it as his
Oh, yes,
wife,
I like
like the
Patricia
main character's
Clarkson.
wife, but yeah, no, it's very unique for network procedural TV for the time, because as I said, it is literally one case over the course of a whole season, so over
Yeah.
20 episodes. They follow it straight through, all the twists and turns, all the build up to the trial. Like it really gets quite deep into like the media coverage of the trial, which back in the 90s that was really a big thing around
Oh,
certain
yeah.
trials. So
Yeah, OJ, the
I
Menendez
think
brothers. Yeah.
yeah, so I think they're definitely touching on what was some like contemporary stuff at the time. But yeah, no, it's just really engrossing all the way through. And when you watch it the first time, it keeps you guessing who the actual killer is, because you got the two main suspects, but then there's other potential suspects as well. And as I said, it's just this brilliantly paced, engrossing show. This one case string over the course of the season with great casting, really great characters. As I said, the lead guy, like the actor, he's not really been in that much, or I've not seen him in that much. He was in an episode of The X-Files. That's the only other thing I've seen him in, but it's a shame he didn't really have, like Daniel Pisano, his name is. It's a shame he
Okay.
didn't really have that much of a career, because he's just so good in it. He's got so much like charisma and just feels like this really like realistic sort of head of this law firm. He does a really great job in it, and yeah, feels very like realistic for that type of character. And they do have other mini cases during the course of the season, I guess, just for a bit of a breather from the main story. They do have other cases around the firm, and it's one of those. There's definitely a lot of actors who went on to become bigger names, like Adam Scott is in it for a few episodes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he plays like this young sort of rich like intern.
That's Anthony LaPaglia. I like him.
Yeah, he's in season 2, so that's the season I haven't seen, because
so that's Murder
the main
2.
guy from
Okay.
season 1 takes over. So we'll have to see. I'll watch that sometime. But like season 1, I highly recommend it. It's just so engrossing all the way through. It really was, because I remember watching it at the time, week to week, and it just being really engrossed in event style TV. And at the time there was very little like it on mainstream TV. And now in a way we're sport for choice, and you probably get quite a lot of other shows that are quite similar. But I mean, even now with like procedural type TV, it's actually quite rare. They do tend to stick more to like the like anthology style format in many ways. I know they've become a bit more serialized, particularly on network TV, which this was. I think if it's on like a more HBO style thing, you might get it a bit more serialized. So this really led to a lot of other stuff. This was really ahead of its time, and I rewatched it in the last few years. I just got the box set because I wanted to rewatch it, and it's absolutely fantastic. It is so engrossing all the way through, and yeah, I think you would really like it, because it has a really good pace to it, and you just get caught up in twists and turns and the different characters and just some of the stuff going on. So highly recommend Murder One. Yeah, definitely a standout from that period in TV. So that's my
Very cool.
number 18.
Nice. I have heard of it, but like I didn't really know much about it. It was just one of those ones that like if you said you murder, I'm like, yeah, I know of that one. But knowing that it's got Stanley Tucci, that's definitely incentive to watch. And I do love a good murder mystery, so I think I'll have to check that one out at some point. Very cool.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely.
So my number 17 is the first sitcom that I have on this list. I'm not always a sitcom kind of girl, but I've gone for a very classic 90s sitcom that will always be full of nostalgia for me and I will always love, and that is Friends. So
Yeah.
I watched Friends in the 90s. I watched Friends as a teenager. I remember watching the finale, the series finale. My best friend came over and we made popcorn and we were all excited to, watch the show finally end. And Friends is just, look, I know that a lot of stuff from the 90s hasn't always aged that well, and there's definitely some stuff in Friends that makes you go, okay, we wouldn't be joking about that now. But I think the characters, the actors, and the general story of these six people is fairly timeless, Such a great cast, like they cast Friends so well. Every single one of those actors just brings something extraordinary to those characters. And, the characters themselves, everyone knows them. Everyone knows, you say Ross and Rachel, people instantly know what you're talking about. You mentioned Joey and Chandler, people instantly know, Phoebe, Monica, everyone knows these names. Friends, I think, for me, I still find it so funny. I think it's still a really hilarious show. I think the delivery Matthew Perry is a genius when it comes to delivering just those deadpan lines. David Schwimmer and his physical comedy is fantastic. I just think that it's one of those shows that it doesn't really lose its appeal, It's always going to be fun to put on the TV and just watch these guys hang out at Central Perk. I think for a show in the 90s, it had some stuff that was a bit progressive. I mean, they weren't always treated that well, but the mere fact that you had Carol and Susan, who were a lesbian couple on a network TV that were raising a child together, that was a little bit, that was not really talked about in the 90s. You had Phoebe carrying her brother's triplets. The surrogacy storyline I thought was quite good as well. I also really liked that the female characters on this show were, for the most part, the later seasons, they get a little bit iffy with the characterization. But Rachel, Monica, and Phoebe are great characters, They all have their own unique storylines. They all have their arcs. Rachel in particular, again, I've said this so many times over, but if you watch her in the first season and you watch her in the last season and you just see how far she's come, I think that the chemistry between the six is fantastic. And I think that worked well for the romantic relationships, as annoying as they can be. Ross and Rachel were a staple in the 90s for a reason. We all rooted for them. Yeah. We all yelled, did she get off the plane? We were all so invested in that relationship. And then you had Monica and Chandler, who were just this fantastic beta couple to Ross and Rachel, and seeing their relationship progress was so great. I think Monica and Chandler are one of the best aspects of that show, seeing them go from friends to lovers to being married to adopting kids. I loved that they had an adoption storyline because I'm an adopted kid myself, so I always love when I see adoption storylines on TV. And Friends is so nostalgic for me. It was such a staple of 90s pop culture, and it was such a huge pop culture phenomenon that I don't think that can be ignored. Shows like How I Met Your Mother would not have existed without Friends, which whether or not that's a good thing we can debate, but it's one of those staples. And like I said, anytime I revisit it, I still find myself laughing out loud. I think it's got some fantastic episodes, especially in the early seasons. Some of those episodes are just so good and so on point. Unfortunately, because it did run for 10 seasons, I do feel like the later seasons do start to drop in quality. We get some really stupid storylines in the later season, like the Chandler watches shark porn episode. I don't know who wrote that episode. That was terrible. Okay. But I think that
I'm terrified just from the description.
Yeah, that one, that was a fun one.
Boggles the mind.
There is a logical
explanation. I might look it up.
I'll leave it up to your imagination. That's more fun. Okay. But no, Friends is, it's a nostalgia trip. It's fun. It was such a huge pop culture phenomenon. Like I said, you just can't ignore the impact that it had on pop culture and how ingrained it was in 90s media and what a staple it was. And I think I'll always love Friends and always love revisiting it. if parts of it have not aged well, I mean, we really need to talk about Fat Monica and everything that entails. But
Yeah,
and it's very white.
I've heard
That's another thing.
stuff.
It's set in New York City, and there's like
It really
nothing for
is.
white
No
people. Yeah,
doubt.
it's like, come on, dudes, let's pull it together. But
Yeah.
ignoring those things and looking at the time it was made in, I think I will always love Friends. So that is my 17 Friends from the 90s, such a
I
staple.
wonder if Go Fish counts as shark porn. That'll be interesting to explore. Definitely something going
I
on
do like that I've boggled your mind now. Now you're just sitting there thinking shark porn,
there.
shark porn.
I'm going to go away and research this stuff. So I think it's fair to say, still to come on your list, we can expect the glorious spin-off Joey, right? That's going to be even higher than
Do
Friends.
not talk about
no.
Joey.
Okay.
Oh my God.
No, forgot
Joey,
about
no,
that
that
one.
show does not exist. That happened in some alternate reality that we don't talk about.
I think he wishes it didn't exist now, to be fair, probably.
Right? Because it was so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Friends is a funny one because it is a show which I watched at the time, like not as religiously as you, but I definitely had a good run of episodes, and I remember it being a real phenomena and crossing over in the UK because they had an episode in London, for example.
Yes,
I remember
they did.
that
The one in London.
whole deal, yeah, being a big thing at the time. So I watched it at the time, but it's this weird one which I haven't really watched since, bar the occasional episode. As regulars will know, I do regular like watches of TV pilots. So I did do the pilot one time on the stream, and I've watched like a couple of other random episodes here and there, but I've never really sat down and watched it properly since like it was originally on, so I can't really say if I love it or not. Like chances are, because of that, I'm not really gonna have the love that you do for it, but I can obviously see that it is a very watchable sitcom, like from what I have seen. Dip in and out. As you know, I'm a big Phoebe fan. She is my favourite character. I love the
Lisa Kudrow
now. Yeah, sorry, that's
Lisa Kudrow is
Lisa
brilliant.
Kudrow, amazing. Yeah, Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh, so good. Love that movie.
Had so many big Hollywood actors in it, like guest starring and stuff.
So many.
You know, for a sitcom at the time, that's very rare to really get names that big because it's still in the era where TV was seen as like films, you know, little brother sort of thing. So it's not like nowadays where it's very common for film stars to be appearing in like big TV shows. It was very different back then. So the fact they got some of the names they did. Wasn't Bruce Willis in it?
Yes, Bruce Willis did a 3-episode run. He was brilliant. Alec Baldwin's character was fantastic. Susan Sarandon, Winona Ryder, Jeff Goldblum. There is an episode that has Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. However, it was not planned. They pop in for the opening scene because apparently they were just near the set one day and they went, "Hey, Robin Williams and Billy Crystal, can we get them to be?" So yeah, they come in for this one scene, this little opening scene where they sit at the sofa at Central Perk and have this whole conversation. So yeah, no, lots and lots of guest stars on Friends, and they were always fantastic. Oh, Gary Oldman's appearance is fantastic.
I didn't know he was in it.
He plays an actor who comes on and teaches Joey how to enunciate. And when you enunciate, you spit. And so there's like this scene where they're basically just spitting at each other as they do their lines.
Yeah, I can hear him. I can hear him delivering that line, Number 17 is another more recent show, actually, and a big favourite of mine for more recent. And that is The Americans, the Fox series.
Yes, you have talked about
them. So this is
before.
Definitely like a storyline or a theme that's been covered many times in spy movies over the years or like TV shows. But this definitely updates it and makes it very different. Like it puts its own unique mark on like the Cold War era in America, where you have to set up, in case you don't know the show, like you've got Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys, who are like a couple Russian spies, so they're both originally Russian, but they live in the suburban like area of America, so they're undercover as spies during the Cold War era. And But they have a setup there which is like the perfect cover, which is they have a family and they hang out with their neighbors, and like on the surface they appear like traditional American couple, like the whole family values, happy life, that kind of American dream, which is a big theme in the show. And across the way, as it so happened, you've got the character of Stan, who's an FBI agent. And so during the course of the series, he's obviously investigating these characters and like Russian spies in general without fully being aware of what's going on across the street, and what his neighbours really are. And they obviously become friends, their children become friends. So it becomes a whole thing over the course of the show, the tension of how much is he going to find out? Is he going to catch them at some point? Is he going to learn the truth? And so it's a period drama that they really use for like some really meaty stuff, like exploring some really meaty issues. Like Mad Men, it does a great job of like dipping in and out of different time periods, but also different themes, like just stuff that's in the news around that time, and just using it like kind of through a modern lens. But like once again, like the show has a particular style. It is very stylistic, but also quite gritty and tense at times. It is how it doesn't really take a side one way or the other, because you know, a lot of times with American stories, they're typically probably going to take the side of the Americans. And the truth is, there's probably faults on both sides. You know, there's somewhere in the middle is where the truth lies. So, but I really like how you get the parallel narrative. So you get the goings on at the FBI, and there's certain like inner workings there, where at one point Martha, this character who the Matthew Rhea's character is like using for information, this stuff really goes deep into like the lengths they'll go to and their whole like covers and identities, because at one point they even get married. It becomes more sophisticated because I think you see how he does actually genuinely care for her, but at the same time he's caught between two stones. He's kind of caught between loyalty for his country and the mission, but also morality and, you know, some sort of consciousness getting it. Sinks its teeth into some of these issues and themes, the show, because it does explore how this is likely to put pressure on their marriage, like typically, and some of the past. You get like flashbacks to the past. And one of the things it does very early in the show, which definitely sets up what happens to a certain extent in the final season, is that it definitely sets the character of Philip up as the less traditional, as a character who is actually getting more into American culture and actually he does have ideas of settling down one day and maybe leaving the Russian spy setup, and so he actually is getting quite seduced by the idea of the American dream,
becoming the mask almost. That's cool.
Whereas the Carrie Russell character, she is more traditional and more loyal to Russia, and they have these debates throughout, and that's a good setup for what happens a little bit in the final season. And there's just such a great setup, because it's revealed early on that the children at the start of the show, they don't even know, like they've been lied to, like the mother and dad are going out doing these different missions that like at the start of the show that they don't know, they have no idea what they really do, like a travel agency, and that's kind of what they present as their day-to-day job. So it really goes deep into like that level of detail. The best storylines of the whole show, I think, which is really engaging and intriguing to see play out, is then the character of Paige, who's like the daughter, like the older of the children. She at one point becomes very interested in religion, and so she gets attached to like this particular like religious couple, and she's interested in joining the church. But because of the whole thing about the parents not wanting Paige to tell the truth, and that potentially, like, if she trusts this like priest too much, this like pastor, she could say something that they don't want her to say. She could give away that
Yeah.
so that becomes a whole thing in itself. So you get an ongoing thing where eventually she finds out the truth, that being Paige, about what they do. And then it really gets deep into this stuff to like the mythology and the pipeline of how they do things, because the way it works out is the Russian side of things, they want to do basically what they did with Elizabeth years ago, the mother. They want to turn Paige into another spy.
Oh,
So
okay.
that they want to like slowly train her and get her involved. And obviously that causes more conflict with the parents, because Philip has the idea, no, I don't want my daughter involved in this way of life. I want her to live her own life and make her own choices. So because, as I said, Elizabeth is more loyal to the Russian side of things, you get a dispute on their couple. Religion is another big theme, I think, because obviously, you know, traditionally, like during the Cold War, Russia was a very like religious type country. So religion definitely a really meaty thing in the show. But the ongoing conflict with that Paige storyline is some of the best drama on the whole show. I remember a particularly great gripping cliffhanger at the end of one season. So really great casting, really great performances. You've got Margot Montandale as like their sort of long running handler, and she's very interesting. She's a really meaty character, a really tough character who kind of gets off on the wrong foot with them at times, but then slowly becomes a bit more their friend in some ways. You've also got an appearance, quite a long running appearance, from Franklin Geller, who's again, like an old style. Yeah, so that's a pretty big name for the show, but he's another sort of retired handler who sort of takes over at some point. But he, again, is very different to the Margot Montandale character. And the show is also known for its like music, the soundtrack. You get a lot of really great like 1970s, 1980s style rock songs or pop songs, and it's very well done, like the use of music. Like, for example, there's a really good use of a Fleetwood Mac track at one point in a particular scene. So it's not only that it's an amazing soundtrack on its own, it's how they use the song. Like, I think it is one of the best examples I've seen of using music in very distinct, unique ways. Like, there's a choice moment, because when Philip is getting more into American culture, you actually see him doing like line dancing in like one episode, and he's starting to get more interested in that. And so you get a particularly like country western song that they're playing there. So the way they use the music is just really fantastic. And it's such a gritty, such a stylish show with great character depth. And lots of light and darks really between the two like the two sides. As I said, they don't really take a side, and that's really impressive. They kind of show the flaws, but then also some of the merits, I think, from both sides. Because, it's a really rich, satisfying show, with a really good finale as well. The finale definitely sticks the landing. Very consistent. Like, there's probably, I would say, maybe, and it's just personal choice, I think for me there's maybe a little bit of a dip around about season 5, like just quite early on, and it's not really a big thing, but it's maybe just because there's a storyline that doesn't quite like jive as well as some of the others, but it's not like terrible or anything like that. And it picks up again, and it has a really good final season and finale, like I said. So really great drama. I highly recommend The Americans.
Nice. It is one that I actually started the pilot a few years ago and then ran into a rape scene and went, okay, I'm done, because I hadn't had any warning, and I do find those scenes kind of triggering. But I then went and read about the series and read about where this scene leads to and how they use it. And once I knew that it, like, if I go back now and I know that it's coming, then I can brace myself. It's more that I just put the episode on, didn't know what I was expecting, and then ran into that scene and went, oh, okay, no, because I have heard nothing but good things about this show, and I like Kerry Russell, and the small bit. Yeah, the small bit that I did see was definitely intriguing. It was just, when I run across things like that without any warning, it can be a bit, okay, no, I need to get out of the situation. Sure. So going back in with warning and knowing what to expect, I think it could be really interesting. Because, I remember hearing a little bit about that storyline with their daughter, I think through Tumblr when that was happening, people were talking about that. Yeah. And it definitely looks like a really interesting show. Just the concept I found so interesting because I didn't know that happened. Apparently that this was a thing, sleeper agents in America during the Cold War that were Russian, parading as American families. And I just thought that is insane. Like this stuff that you just don't know about. Crazy concept, but definitely a show that I will check out at some point because I think Steven's interested in seeing it too. So
if he is, it's amazing because he's Welsh in real life and he's just so convincing doing like the American accent and stuff. Yeah. It's really quite interesting when you see him in an interview and he's actually got a Welsh accent, but he definitely does the American accent very well.
Right in the center at my number 16 is a little show that ran in the 2000s about Superman, and that is Smallville. So I love Smallville. Superman, when I was younger, was always my favorite comic book hero because I loved the Christopher Reeves movies growing up. And so when they started Smallville, which is obviously Clark Kent as a teenager, I was very excited. And I used to watch it on TV as regularly as I could, catching it here and there. And then finally, when they started to release it on DVD, I bought it and watched the whole series. So I think it's a fun concept. Obviously, they have done it in the comics. You do have Superboy, but it is a fun concept to see Clark Kent before he was Superman. So you have Clark as a teenager, starts the series as 15. No one's buying, but Tom Welling is actually 15, but we'll leave that aside. So he starts the series in his first year of high school, and they do this fun little twist where he meets Lex Luthor in the first episode, and they actually become really close friends, and they are like my favorite ship on the show, like Clark and Lex. That's what the show is all about. And watching their friendship first progress and then splinter and then shatter and then get to the point where they are actually enemies is honestly one of the best aspects of this show. I've spoken before how this is my favorite incarnation of Lex Luthor. Michael Rosenbaum is just chef's kiss. Like, he is so good, and the characterization and the depth that they give Lex in this series is fantastic. He has a particular storyline in season 3 that really goes into his background and his upbringing and what it was like to be the son of Lionel Luthor. Because Lex can't be the bad guy originally, his father is the original bad guy, Lionel Luthor, and John Glover, who plays him, is again fantastic, so good. Clark himself is a really fun character. It's really interesting to see Superman at this point, and he is still developing his abilities. So we get to see him receive some of his abilities, like his X-ray vision and his heat vision and a few other things that he didn't have yet. Like, he's already got his super speed and his super strength, but we get to see him discover his other abilities. And his journey is really interesting as well, to see him go from a teenager to an adult and learn what it means to have these powers, the responsibilities he has, the secrecy that he has to kind of hide behind because, they don't want him to be discovered because he could be taken away by scientists or anything. So you have a lot from his parents' point of view as well, Martha and Jonathan Kent. So you really get to see from their point of view what it's like for them to raise a boy like this, someone who is different, someone who could be taken away from them. Now, the way Smallville works out its Monster of the Week storylines is obviously there is a meteor shower. That's the meteor shower that Clark came to Smallville in when he was a baby. And the meteor rocks affect different people. So sometimes they'll give different people different abilities. So they're called meteor freaks, and they're kind of the Monster of the Week. So you usually have a meteor freak that has a certain power. Clark will have to battle them, that sort of thing. But I think with Smallville, as with a lot of the shows that I love on this list, it's really the characters that keep me coming back. Lana Lang is one of my favorite characters of all time. She receives so much hatred in the Smallville fandom, and it's utterly ridiculous because she is a fantastic freaking character, and I love her with all my heart. So she, keeps me coming back. Clark himself, Lex, all great characters. We get introduced to Lois Lane later in the series, and she's really fun. And there's all these other great characters that come and go. What is also really fun about Smallville is they get almost every major Superman alum in this series. So you have Christopher Reeve comes in for 2 or 3 episodes, and when he died, they dedicate an episode to his memory. Margot Kidder pops up, Terry Hatcher, Dean Cain, Terrence Stamp. They even retroactively, and this was completely by accident, but they have Amy Adams guest star in an episode, and even she went on to play Lois Lane. So they have a lot of Smallville alum, and they have a lot of fun. Yeah, with their concept. And it's just a really fun series. Now, unfortunately, as with a lot of long-running series, the later seasons do go a little bit up and down in quality. And it does get to the point where you're basically like, okay, so he's essentially Superman in everything but name. By the end of a series, we're in Metropolis, he's working at the Daily Planet, he's dating Lois Lane. So it's like he's basically become Superman, but they're not allowed to call him Superman until the final episode. And there were a lot of complaints that we didn't get to see him fly until the final episode. But I remember I said to Steven, I was like, I don't know what people are complaining about, because there really was only ever one way that they could end this series, and that is with Clark running towards the camera, opening up the Superman shirt. That was the only way they were ever going to be able to end that series, because it's so iconic, and that is how they end it. So, but the fact that everyone was complaining about it, I'm like, nah, you've got to look at what you're watching, and this worked. And what's fantastic is, in the final shot where you see him on the roof doing the classic take off the glasses, open the shirt, they actually use the Superman theme from the Christopher Reeves movies. And it's really fantastic to get that final shot. But Smallville, again, a little bit of nostalgia for my teen years, but it's a really fun series. And especially, I would say the first 4 seasons are really solid. After that, we do go a bit up and down in quality, but it's got some great, emotional moments. It's got some great dynamics. Like I said, the relationship between Clark and Lex is just, heartbreaking. Listening to Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling are doing a podcast where they're rewatching the series, and I've been listening to and watching their podcast on YouTube, and it's just fantastic to hear all these little tidbits coming out about the filming and the behind the scenes. Tony Todd is in an episode. He plays a great character in a season 1 episode. And Michael Rosenbaum, and both Tom and Michael were talking about how, when he got on set, they were both kind of scared of him because they only knew him from Candyman. So they were kind of really nervous and oh my God. But then apparently Michael has become really good friends with him since, and really got to know him very well. But yeah, so Smallville is it's a really fun show. And I think anyone who loves Superman as a comic book character would enjoy this show, because it just shows you a different side to him, and seeing him as a teen opens up a lot of really fun doors and a lot of things that you can do with his powers and, with his growing relationships. And even if it did fizzle out a little bit towards the end, it's still a really fun show. And every time I go back and rewatch it, I find myself just having a really, really good time. And it doesn't hurt that Tom Welling is really fine. Seriously, every time he takes his shirt off, I'm just
I've never seen him, so I have no idea. But
he is beautiful.
I'll give it a shot at one point. I'm not really expecting to like it, to be honest, but you never know.
I mean, it might not be your sort of show, and it was a CW show, so it does have that kind of CW, feel to it. And I do think it might be a show that if you didn't watch it in its original run, it may be a bit hard to get into. But I also just wanted to add that without this show, we would not have had the DC TV verse. Again, whether or not that's a good thing you can debate, but we wouldn't have had Arrow and The Flash and Supergirl and all of these shows without Smallville. This was the originator, and really showed that you could put comic books on TV and have an audience for them. So when you do watch it, it will be interesting, and we'll see how you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen the pilot episode of Lois and Clark, speaking of Terry Hatcher. Which was
nice.
And that's one I'm definitely going to go back and watch more, because Terry Hatcher as Lois Lane is fantastic.
She was fantastic, and I loved Lois and Clark back in the day. That was a big 90s staple for me.
I've only seen that one episode, but I did quite enjoy the pilot, so I think I will go back and see more of that show.
Yeah.
So my number 16 is actually a nice link to your number 16, and that's because it is from one of the big other superhero characters, and that is my number 16. I've gone with Batman the Animated Series.
Nice.
So this is another one, a bit like one of my other picks, where I've been watching it recently. 3 seasons, and the first season is the biggest season. Like the first season has about 60 plus episodes, and then you've got like 2 slightly shorter seasons, 50 episodes. So I think that's enough of a base to like include it on this sort of a list. It's one of those people had been recommended for years, like comic book fans of Batman were really high on it. They said it was one of the best, if not maybe the best depiction of Batman, like on screen. And many people consider the Joker in it, played by Mark Hamill, to be the best depiction of Joker on screen.
I have heard that.
Definitely it's out of him and Heath Ledger, probably. I think they're numbers 1 and 2, maybe different depictions, but maybe drawn in many ways. Beautifully captures the mood of Batman, of the character at its core, like the noir settings, like the feel of Gotham City as this crime-ridden city with like lots of energy, lots of like colourful sets, Gothic style sets. Again, it does like bring Batman back to its basics, its core of being like a noir crime style show, which is a big appeal of this character with a dual identity, lurking in the shadow with like dark secrets which only a select group of people close to him know. And you've got a wonderful Batman doing the voice, some great guest stars doing really great guest work. So Ron Perlman, for example, is a good example. He showed up at one point in quite an early episode. You've got a favourite of mine, but the actress who played Lucy in Twin Peaks, she does a guest star at one point, voicing one of the characters in a particular episode, which is themed on like the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. Nice. Lucy Moran, the actress, is Lucy from Twin Peaks. To playing Batman, who sadly passed away recently, so R.I.P. to him. And also a great Joker, a great clutch of villains. It's also notable that this was the series that introduced Harley Quinn into the Batman universe.
Yes, I knew that,
because she was a new character from the show. She wasn't someone who was in the comics originally, and then she was like brought into the comics following this show, and now it's this massive
very cool
culture, icon because of like the Harley Quinn played by Margot Robbie. Massive now. So, but this is where it got its start on the show, and she is a really fascinating counterculture style character of her own. Her relationship with the Joker is really intriguing, but it just gets the mood of like classic Batman, classic Gotham City so well done. It fits very nicely into like the old school like Case of the Week style TV very nicely, where you have these really well written, satisfying 22-minute episodes each time. But it does expand on things as well. It expands on the world. It does like some like continuing storylines where you get like a 2-parter or a 3-parter, and you do get some serialized stuff going on as well, some recurring themes with obviously like the Joker in Arkham Asylum, him escaping at various points, as I've said, and just some wonderful characters and storytelling and the feel for the world. And I've said this before, but the animation for the time, because the show started in 92, and this is network TV for 92, and the animation is just so impressive for the era, because but back then, like all the money for animation tended to go into film. It wasn't really a lot of budget for like animation on TV, which is why things like Daria, the animation was so basic. But on this, for the time period, for the early 90s, the animation is just so visually striking and distinct. First mix of like episodes, you do get ones that are more like comical and like cartoony, but then you get some darker episodes as well, and some great character-driven episodes. So it's a really explosive, fresh like feel to the show. They also bring back the Danny Elfman theme from the Batman movies, from Tim Burton's Batman. They always use that. And I know some people are mixed on Danny Elfman, but I do think his Batman theme is one of the best themes that he's done.
Yeah.
I mean, that really puts you in the mood when that comes on. The hype for it being justified and ahead of its time, and definitely one of the best depictions of Batman and of that universe I've seen. So that's my number 16, Batman the Animated Series.
Very cool. I haven't watched it yet, but it is definitely on my to-watch list because I have heard like really good things about it. And yeah, I've heard it's one of the best, Batman screen adaptations. And yeah, I knew that Harley Quinn had originated in that, and I've heard nothing but good things about Mark Hamill as the Joker. So yeah, Stephen and I almost bought it recently. It was just a tiny bit out of our price range, but we probably will get it eventually. And yeah, definitely have a watch. And it's cool that it tied into my 16 being a superhero themed show as well. So that's a nice little tie-in and good way to cap off this section of the list.
Man, because you've got a couple of the movies as well, like the animated movies they did as like extras, and you've got a whole nice set in there. So we're going to do this in 3 parts. So let us know what you think in the comments of our picks in this part. You can add your own picks. This video, if you just want to go from like 21, isn't it, to like 16, then if you've done a whole 30, then you could do that and just do it. So for the next video, you could do like 15 to 1, that kind of thing. Or just post some of your favourites and respond to some of our picks.
Follow my channel, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. My Tumblr also linked through my YouTube, and I spend a lot of time on Tumblr. So come and follow me everywhere. Keith will usually put a link in the description so that you can find me easily.
Okay, thanks guys. Take care. We'll be back with part 3 soon, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.